Watching the good, the bad, the ugly. This video cast series is really about all things related to DevOps, but we do place an emphasis on securing the software supply chain. My name is Zach Norton. I'm your host, and today I have with me my friend Mike. Mike, thanks for joining me.
Zach, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's been a while.
Yeah, I was going to say with COVID, it's been what, almost a year and a half, a year?
It has, I know. Yeah. No. So I appreciate you making some time to chat with me.
Yeah, always. This is up my alley.
Awesome. So maybe just to start out, for those that don't know you, can you walk us through a little bit about your background? I didn't give an intro, so I'll just pass it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Zach. So I'm a software developer by trade. Found myself in management over the last few years at a couple of startups around the DC area. Yep. Right now I'm the director of engineering at a social determinants of health startup called Socially Determined. It's a real tongue twister there, but we build a risk analytics framework for our end customers. So you can think of like a SaaS solution that applies for HIPAA and high trust, and we're basically trying to bubble up the impactful factors that are happening in people's communities, which are often kind of called social determinants of health. I'm actually not a doctor or a lawyer, so I don't think I can go too much deeper into that. But the technical side of things, I'm happy to jump real deep into.
That's
and then awesome. Prior to that, and kind of how we've met, and working together in the past was I worked at a cybersecurity company called IronNet, building behavioral analytics, network traffic analysis platform. I was the VP of engineering there for about 2.5 years. I was there for about 5 years, so good chance to get in there, pre-Series A, kind of see the madness, start putting things together, start becoming, a bigger company, and getting the investment and customers that kind of come along with that.
That's awesome. I remember when Bill and I went out to your office there, and I think it was Frederick, just seeing all the bikes in the main room. We were like, that was the coolest office I've ever seen. So
yeah, that was a real work hard, play hard type environment. So yeah. And that was a great office. It was right above a bar. It was about a 10% discount. I don't know what happens in COVID anymore. I don't think that applies anymore there, but
right.
It was good.
Awesome. That's awesome. So to start things off, I guess just Mike, maybe you can open it up. Obviously, as you mentioned, you've been a leader in software engineering. Can you walk us through just what are you passionate about these days?
Yeah, since entering a new company that's very small, and we're kind of going through the same inflection point, bringing on more customers, and especially dealing with, sometimes I joke, the toxic waste that is PHI data, that you just have to be extra protective. Customers have a lot of trust in you to handle that. I've actually been just super passionate about data isolation, and then really on the development side, because that's where my heart's at. Some of the same things that I think we've always talked about, like how do we ensure that there's a process in place for having hygiene around development and best practices without it kind of seeming like someone's ramming it in your face. Example is always, get your exercise, get enough sleep, take all your vitamins. Like, that's onerous. So like a big passion for me is like, how do you make that really smooth? And I'm still working on it, but I'm getting better. So
no, I've been impressed with the work that you've done. So I mean, and I appreciate saying you're working on it. I think we're all always continuously working on it, right? So for those that might be just starting out on their journey, or maybe they're farther along, but how do you get started would be the first question in securing a software development lifecycle. You're obviously at a new company now. What are the things that you look for?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great question. A lot of the things that I always kind of look for are some of the fundamentals. I think some of them kind of even span industries. We need to talk about all the great work around frameworks and OWASP and the rest of that, but just really people writing software that's easily testable, that we have an understanding of the inputs of where they're coming from, that we can kind of just model out like what does success look like what does failure look like in some of these. So for like new developers, and I can even categorize myself in this bucket, I didn't know a lot about healthcare data, but just having an understanding of what was expected around that data, and then the code that's operating on it, like what is expected of them? Can I ever commingle somebody else's data? You're really able to make, at least in my mind, a lot of great architectural decisions when you actually understand the business case. And I think sometimes we rush too fast into the technical side. And then the other one, I mean, are we just using just core fundamentals? Like I could run and do it that way, or we could grab a pizza. And I know that's hard in this weird COVID world, and just talk about like, what do we expect to happen as this? And then we can talk to auditors later, like, we expected this to happen, and we actually had the logs to prove it. Like doing that after the fact has always been fraught with air for me. So
Yeah, no, and I've always liked your approach of really baking that process in. So I put out one of those surveys a while ago, kind of off the cuff question here, Mike, where I was kind of asking, where do you start to begin to integrate this feedback to developers? And you mentioned, normally you don't get to see who voted for what, but I'm going to call you out. You said the source control, right, within GitHub or GitLab or whatever that may be. Why was that? And how do you provide this type of feedback to your developers?
yeah, let's go back 3 years when you were in Frederick, and the first thing I told you was, I'm an Emacs guy, and the person across the table is a VI guy, and it's just incredibly important that our pull requests are annotated.
Yeah.
And I know, environments differ everywhere, and I would love to get more of that into my IDE. I know at least in a lot of worlds like VS Code, and Emacs, and VI, this LSP mode that's kind of going across. That's great. I want that in there. I know there's some people that have IDEs that are getting that type of feedback very quickly. But for me, kind of like the great bottleneck for all of this information to kind of have to go through the tube is always like it's source control. Like I want to see it on the pull request. I don't know if this is the right term. Like at the speed of pull request is almost something we've talked about in the past, because at the moment somebody does that, but prior to integrating, like that's just a great time to do it. And anything to the left of that, I mean, I love it. It's just going to speed up the development we're doing, but I'm probably not going to force somebody to use a tool that shows them that immediately, that everybody has to kind of go through this same path. So we're all having the same expectations and, we're getting the value at the same time. So that's where I try to force everything.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense because, I mean, really that's where it's fresh in the developer's mind, right? They just wrote that code, and it's a place where they're naturally collaborating compared to your traditional pipeline scans that get sent to the developers and some other dashboard, right? That they're not actually communicating. So I think just the communication side of it, IDEs is great, right? Continue to ship that left, but really where the collaboration would take place, it seems like that's a great spot for that.
Yeah, another one that I kind of was hesitant on in the past, but has just been a great forcing function, has been, even the lifecycle stuff later. Something's now in production. I still care about the CVEs that happen. And in the past, I would get this report. Okay, Mike, now you're going to go and create that Jira ticket. I actually like a lot of these tooling that are kind of creating that auto PR as well with what they think is the right idea. Still on the developer, it's still on us as engineers to kind of do the right thing. And maybe that pull request isn't the right idea, but the fact is it showed up. Someone's going to have to make an action. Like no one's going to want to stare at this at the face. So, it's the point of entry, and then something always kind of almost coming back to that point of entry, like whether it's on the development branch, whether it's in production. It's just been really interesting. Sometimes I don't agree with what the pull request recommendations actually come out to be from a lot of tooling, but I just appreciate it's there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's awesome. So, and true to the theme, the good, the bad, the ugly, we'll kind of jump into, tell me a story, a success story, something that you've done, implemented along your career path. And then from there, we're going to jump into the bad. So we'll save that.
Yeah. So this is actually just really close to what's happening right now. It's socially determined. I've been here for about a year, so I've kind of got, my stripes going, and I work along a great chief product officer as well. And something that I think has been really good for us when it comes to code quality and security, but it's also just good for the company and the product itself, is the fact that I think in the past, and man, everybody is guilty of this, especially engineers. We get an idea, something comes down from product. I want to divide and conquer it. I now kind of take this pre-step where I say, like, is this even the right thing? Like sometimes these things are huge, and my mental mindset is to just go and chop this thing up. Now I'm having kind of these conversations like back and forth, and like, this is the good. Like, is this needed for phase one? Like, is there any value until like phase 3, or this is for a customer like 5 years out, or this doesn't need to be planet scale just yet? And like, I think why I bring that up and why this has been really impactful for our team, especially as we're growing, because we're getting more people,
right,
is the fact that we're still dividing and conquering these things as little buckets, but like the life cycle of like a small microservice as opposed to, hey, we're going to do all this functionality at once. It's easier to wrap your head around. It's easier to figure out like all the infrastructure as code, permissions, like we were talking about, just prior to hitting the start button. How do you do that? You're either getting a list that's got 10,000 entries, or you're getting one that has 20. it's just easier to kind of go through the 20. We've been shipping faster. And I know that always sounds like, well, do the MVP thing. And I think I'm kind of saying that, but I think I'm saying it from a different angle, which is just more, man, it's not only been better for morale, it's not only been better for like security, but like I feel like we've been just shipping a better product because it's in my own mindset. And when we talk about the bad, like I'll talk about the other half of that.
Yeah.
So
Well, question there before you jump into that. So, or just make sure I'm understanding correctly. Are you talking about smaller batch sizes?
I'm talking about smaller batch sizes, but I'm actually talking more about just even the actual business requirements around something, like, because those influence the code that directly is happening in the product.
Okay.
On the smaller batch size, I'm a huge fan of continually shipping. And if we have things feature flagged off, and that's something we've done heavily at Socially Determined, it's just provided us much value, because whenever we do a deployment, and we usually ship today 2 to 3 times a week, and we're getting better about that, but that's kind of like our great cadence.
Yeah.
Is the fact that if there is anything that kind of pops up, I mean, it's about a day out. So for us, it's just very clear kind of where it came from. We catch regressions much faster than like the big bang type situation.
I love it, Mike. That's awesome.
Yeah, you got to get in the mindset of it. Like, people need to realize,
Yeah,
hey,
no,
when
that's
it lands on that branch, it might go out. So you have to be on your A game. So
yeah. So jumping into the bad, and I might throw you off. You might have two things there, but you've been a person that has obviously had a background in security and right, and DevOps. We're all trying to smaller batch sizes, build quicker, right? Get value for organization. How do you maybe what are some challenges that you've or that you came across with communicating to the developers on this security workflow and so forth?
yeah, I mean, a big one, and it's kind of like the flip side of what we just talked about. If you do a big deployment, and then you get that readout from your security tooling suite, now you have 1,000 issues that you have to deal with. You can go and do that. It's not hard to go and give everybody a bucket of those and resolve it. You can go and adjust your roadmap, but like, I'd also challenge that, like, how did you get there in the first place? And something we're trying to be very prescriptive about, and I probably could have always been better about this. I guess everybody in the past, but especially with COVID, I've really tried to up my game on this one. How are you communicating these constantly? And it's is it a weekly email where you're talking about something that you're really interested in, or a piece of the scan that the team should focus on, or whenever you're going through your pointing session, like, hey, we're actually putting this on the board because we want to talk about this. Like, if you're only getting that at the end of the pipeline, and then now you're actually just kind of going on a death march, everyone's got to fix all the security stuff.
Sure. No,
you kind of tanked.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. So I guess to kind of conclude it here, what's something that you had a failure in and you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely waiting too long to ship stuff, and sometimes that's hard. Like, I can give you a great example. Like, there have been products in the past, where there's a hardware component and a software component. It's great to run super fast in the cloud, but you can't always do that on hardware in all instances. You could do it in pieces of it, but you have to have some type of like foundational work to kind of get there. And I think getting there, it's longer than a lot of people think sometimes. Like, you have to be really focused as a company to do it. So I think, probably a failure in the past, and something that I've definitely taken a lot of time to resolve, is just, we talked about pushing back on features that maybe aren't required for the first round. You can go and get a lot of stuff in, but the other half is just understanding the cadence of things and trying to keep it, small. Like, it's easier to secure, easier to ship. I know everybody says that, so it's kind of cliche to throw that out there, but a lot of people don't think about it. Like, with a piece of hardware, even some environments, you can't even update it that often. There's going to be kind of change mortuarium, so you just have to really think about how you're doing that, and it's hard. Someone might say you can only push it once a month, so you don't want to stop that, but you have to have a good cadence for it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense there, Mike. Well, so the two things that I kind of wrote down is properly scoping it, right? Like you talked about, as well as the small batch sizes, right? Just continue to shrink those down that you've learned. So that's great. Hey, appreciate you being willing to come on here. Hopefully we can meet up here in person soon once we get past the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, Zach, I'll add one last one to you,
Sure.
just because I always think it's interesting. When I look at the tickets and I kind of go together with the group, if everybody understands, what it is we're building, and probably, what the acceptance criteria to actually mean done is,
Yeah.
you're probably going to see success, you know. And to your point on the last one, I liked how you worded it, but I could even just say that concrete piece of like, what does it mean to be done? Like, has somebody not only, you know, passed all these checks, but do they even understand what they built? Why?